Let's stick with that diversity piece and talk about the 30 different plants in a week, because I think this is a great goal for people. It's going to get them, hopefully, when they're doing their grocery shopping, checking out different things and figuring out different recipes to include these. But why is the diversity so important? Let's take that right into the gut, getting these different plants to the microbiome. Why is that important?
Okay, so the 30 plant rule came from a study that I did with Rob Knight's team in San Diego about 5 or 6 years ago, where we looked at 11,000 Brits and American guts and correlated the diversity and health of their gut microbiome with things in their diet. And what we turned out that the number one factor that correlated with the best gut health was not whether they were vegan, it wasn't whether they were gluten-free, vegetarian, pescatarian, whatever. It was just the number of different plants they ate over a week. And that's what really sort of changed our minds about this. This was a pretty good mantra for people to take, that you could come at it from lots of different directions. It, didn't specify which type of plant they were. And people forget what plants are. Plants are not just your kale and broccoli and spinach, but they are also the average seed, which is incredibly nutritious. It's a nut, and different nuts count as different plants. It can be, I now think of coffee as a plant. I didn't before. This is, my research into coffee, how amazingly good it is. And it's actually a source of fiber a major source of fiber for most Americans, for example. Dark chocolate is made from a bean that is a plant. So if you take that more liberal view of plants, it's quite easy to get your 30 a week. And if you have to think of a plant is made up of lots of different fibers and chemicals, and the key part is it's a whole plant. So it goes beyond your stomach and your small intestine, goes right down to the colon, where it can be met by your microbes, and they start to digest it with their enzymes. They break it apart, they get the nutrients, and they're stimulated by other things in the plants called polyphenols, which they use as energy. And in return, they produce all these healthy chemicals that are key for our metabolism, our immune system, regulating our brain, our mood, all kinds of other stuff. So it's that link of getting the right foods to the right place. And the reason they have to be different is that they're so highly specialized that you have a different set of microbes that's going to be attacking your purple carrot and your orange carrot, because the chemicals in those two plants are different. And so it'd be a whole different team of microbes working on them. And if you give them different foods, you'll be able to grow up different microbes. That's the theory of what we're trying to do here, and why it's important not to do, the old English way of eating. Well, a bit of meat and 2 veg was and one of the veg was potatoes. It would either be carrots or peas. That's all, that was the, seen as a healthy meal. But now it's very much, it'd be meat and 5 veg. Should be the new sort of mantra. And so if you try and get variety, you're not going to get too much of anything. So if you're every meal you're thinking about getting that diversity in there, you don't tend to overeat on any of the starchy carbs that people worry about. Quite rightly, because if you just ate mashed potato all the time or fluffy rice, you're getting huge sugar spikes, and for many people, not everybody, that can be unhealthy. But it doesn't mean you can't then have a small amount of rice, as long as you've got lots of other plants on that plate as well.
So just to make sure I have this right, you talked about how plants have these polyphenols. Diversity is important. Does science know yet why that diversity is so important? It's not just a fiber thing, getting a certain amount of fiber, whether it be soluble, insoluble. What I'm getting at here, do we understand the different chemicals in the different plants that highlights the importance of the diversity? Is it polyphenols, or is it stuff that science hasn't discovered yet?
Well, it's undoubtedly a bit of the latter, but it's certainly a lot of it is polyphenols. But we still know very little about polyphenols. There are thousands of them, and many of them we don't know their functions, or we can measure their total amounts, but we don't know all the individual ones that go on. And there's a huge variety of in polyphenol counts in foods, and this is one thing I go into in the book in a lot of detail, is trying to work out within a range, say lettuces, salads, you can have a 2,000-fold difference between the amount of healthy polyphenols in that plant, so that you'd have to eat 1,000 times more iceberg lettuces, for example, than a nice Lolo Rosso Italian lettuce with those purple tips, because there's virtually no nutrients in an iceberg lettuce, and there's masses in that other one, which you can sort of look and see with your eyes, the pigment, and you can taste that slight peppery bitterness too. That gives you the clues. So I think it's really interesting to try and link what we can do with our eyes and our mouth to, and we can choose foods and link that to the chemistry underneath, so that when you're having those two different foods, one, you're getting no polyphenols and very little fiber and just a dressing for the mayonnaise or whatever. But it does last, 3 weeks at the bottom of your fridge. And the other one, which goes off, and you've got all these defense chemicals and you've got the fiber, and it's having a really major effect on your body and producing, keeping lots of microbes alive. So that's why I want people to learn more about food and get excited about the different types that we're seeing, and not just be sort of spoon-fed whatever, food companies or hotels want to feed us, which generally tends to be the stuff that never goes off, that has no taste, that has no polyphenols, that is rotten. Like the ubiquitous breakfast bar in Canada and the US, the green melon, it's the most thrown away item, I think, in North America. And
honeydew?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Because, they're bred for just lasting a long time, looking good, having no taste and virtually no nutrients.
A few years ago, the big talk, or one of the big talks in the health space, was antioxidants. And I know antioxidants somehow tie into this polyphenol thing. Are they is polyphenols a type of antioxidant? Are they just renaming antioxidants now to polyphenols, or how do those fit together?
Well, antioxidants was a general term for things that they knew were beneficial, but they didn't quite know how they worked. And there was this general theory that these were sort of nutritious chemicals that somehow mopped up dangerous excess chemicals in the cells and the reactions. And we now know that a large number of those antioxidants are actually polyphenols, and they don't work directly on the body. They have to work via the gut microbes, who then produce chemicals that then help the body. So we're slowly discovering that we didn't really know what antioxidants were. We just knew there were some generally healthy chemicals in foods, and working out now more the mechanisms of how they work. So we're still sorting this out, and there are still a few antioxidants that aren't polyphenols or don't come into that general category. But most of them, I think, are in these polyphenols or group of phenolic compounds that we're increasingly seeing. But it's slightly confusing as we make this transition. But I think most people, when they talked about antioxidant, didn't really understand what it meant. It is a vague scientific term, and it sort of served a purpose for a while, but I think we can generally ignore it now.
Yeah, it was always very general. We want more antioxidants, and they're going to help mop up free radicals in the body. That was the big thing.
Yeah, and I think that was also the time when we were talking about purging the body of toxins and cleansing and all this mumbo jumbo that we now know is complete nonsense. That, and actually it's just the repair process that happens every day in our cells. And so I think, we're growing up slowly, but it's taken a while because, we just haven't had the science behind it to really understand. And the gut microbes are unlocking a lot of this science to tell us, how they convert something in food to an active compound that can affect the body.
Tim, I know last time we chatted, we got into polyphenols and how they end up reacting with the gut microbiome and what they do, but I want to make sure I'm really clear on this. Let's continue the story here. So polyphenols, we want to get lots of them. We want to get them, there's a bunch of different ones, so we want a diverse array. What happens when they get down to the gut microbiome? You mentioned that the gut makes chemicals out of them. Is this postbiotics, or what are these chemicals?
Yes, so they act as energy for the gut microbes. So particular gut microbes will be sent, they can smell out the different types of plant you're eating, they'll zoom in on it, and they'll start burrowing away in order to get the little nuggets of polyphenols that they can then use for energy and then replicate and get, have more babies and grow their colony, and then in turn produce their own chemicals. And the chemicals that microbes produce, as you rightly said, are called postbiotics. And these postbiotic chemicals, it's a sort of new term. It's a bit like probiotics, but made by the microbes. And we know that they actually make a large number of things that we thought were only made by the liver. So they can replicate a lot of things that the human body makes, but also make a lot of products that humans can't make. And what's called a postbiotic is when we believe it has some health benefit, because we haven't classified every chemical they make, because a lot of them are just to help themselves or communicate directly with the immune system or the nervous system or the brain or whatever. But ones that seem to have a direct health benefit are these postbiotics. And so this is a whole new area of therapy, because people are thinking about growing up vast vats of bacteria that can produce these really healthy chemicals as a new form of supplementation, for example, without having to eat the food and have the gut microbes. So there's an enormous amount of interest that these are sort of naturally occurring chemicals in our body, must be safe by definition because they're in us, and how do we make more of them?
Let's talk about short chain fatty acids and how they fit into this whole big picture.
So they're one of the classical postbiotics, and they are made when particular microbes are fermenting plants. So you can't get them they don't actually come from fats, interestingly. So they come from when a microbe is having some fiber-rich foods. It's a fiber-digesting microbe, and it picks up whatever energy it needs from the polyphenols of that plant, and then it will produce these short-chain fatty acids. And the commonest one of those is butyrate, and it's believed to be a really beneficial postbiotic that has benefits particularly on our immune cells and regulating the immune system, and dampens down inflammation, and is generally healthy. What's interesting is that when they've given butyrate in clinical trials to people, you get rather sporadic results. So it shows that it's not as easy just to transfer what the microbes do in a natural environment, and you can't suddenly make it into a pill and it's a game changer. So, and it could be because there's a ratio of that particular product compared to other ones, other short-chain fatty acids that's important, or it could be other things we're still ignorant about. But that's one of the big things about why we believe that eating fiber is important. Nothing to do with cleansing our digestive tract or repairing or having fast transit times. It's the fact that this allows all these short-chain fatty acids to be produced, which we know that is generally healthy. People who have high levels of these short-chain fatty acids naturally are much healthier and tend to be thinner and have less diseases. So it's increasingly used as a marker of good health.
And do we specifically know what the short chain fatty acids are doing in the body, where they're going, and why they're so important?
We know a little bit, but we certainly don't have the full picture. We maybe know 10% of what's going on with them. They are quite hard to measure, and it's hard to trace them entirely. And that's why most of the work has been going on their interactions with T cells in the lining of the gut, the immune cells. So they're really important in suppressing food allergies and things like that, or the immune cells overreacting. They may have a role in aging and repair. There's lots of potential reasons, but it seems to be a tight control of the immune system, and so it doesn't overreact, doesn't underreact, but it does fight infection, etc., and it is useful for repair and picking up early cancers and these things. So it probably has a widespread role all across the body rather than one specific one that we can home in on, and that's maybe why just giving people vast doses of butyrate, which I think it was used in stink bombs and various other things, and it's produced in rotting fish and things in large amounts. So it's a strange compound to think of as super healthy. But
talk more about that connection between the immune system and the gut. We know a big part of the immune system is down there surrounding, our gut, and it's very well integrated with the microbiome down there. So we know we've been talking about, building up a healthy gut microbiome, how important this is, but let's go deeper into why, from an immune standpoint, this is so important.
Most of our immune cells are actually in the lining of our gut. So no one really understood why that was for a long time. People thought it was just a defensive barrier to combat what was going on, but increasingly it seems to be that it's for communication rather than as a defense. So all the way along the gut, the immune cells are receiving nutrients from the gut. So that's as food is being digested, bits of it are going to feed the immune cells on the gut wall, but they're also getting these chemical signals from the microbes, telling them about the food that's being eaten and stimulating them to, as I said, to react or underreact, as a way of making sure that the immune system is working well. It may be also to do with whether it's feeding time or fasting time, about whether it can relax, because we have a circadian rhythms for this, and it's not just about daylight. The gut is a really important driver of whether our body's in action mode or it's in rest mode. And so all these signals have been passed to the immune cells, and then they pass this on through the body, or, to the rest of the body to say, let's rest and repair, or, let's get ready to fight, guys, and not to overreact or underreact. And so that's why many people think that because of the deterioration in our diet in the last 30 years, we've got the wrong signals from our gut microbes. That's upset our immune cells, and we have this epidemics of food allergies, for example, that just didn't exist 40 years ago, because the immune cells are overreacting because they're just not getting the right signals to calm them down from the gut. So many other potential things that have changed, depending on where you see that, if you see that our gut microbes have changed so dramatically in the last 100 years compared to the last few million, it sort of makes sense, whereas our immune cells probably haven't.
Tim, I know you're a big fan. We've talked about the diversity. We want to get at least 30 different plants in per week to keep our microbiome healthy. I know you're not a big fan of labeling certain foods as superfoods, but are there certain heavy hitters when it comes to these polyphenols, fiber, certain foods people might want to consider as part of that 30 on a regular basis that are especially good for the gut?
Yeah, I mean, the book goes into this in a fair bit of detail, and there are tables outlining what the best ones are. You know, your best bang for your buck is to combine fiber and polyphenols together, right? So you sort of covering your bases. And so, I've listed coffee as an unlikely one, right? Most people wouldn't call that a superfood, but it does increasingly looking like one. Then you've got a whole range of berries, and the humble blueberry, which is ubiquitous, does pretty well. You don't have to get some Peruvian superberry just to be good. Something like a blueberry, a blackberry, a raspberry, all of these are good. You freeze them when they're in season, and they are perfectly good in terms of the polyphenol and fiber count when you defrost them. So there are a few easy tips that you can use year round, for breakfast or on your salads or whatever. We have nuts and seeds, which are inexpensive and hugely good in terms of fiber and polyphenol counts. And you can get a lot of variety by using different ones. And I always keep a big jar of mixed seeds and nuts in my kitchen that I'm always replenish when I find some new nut or seed. I just put it in. And again, you don't have to go for the expensive superfood, trendy seed of the month. It's the variety that's really important there. And I think what I discovered actually, there's much more to mushrooms than meets the eye. And I think I'd been really underestimating mushrooms, and I think mushrooms are a pretty good superfood. That they're really high in protein content, they're really high in fiber, and they're more like animals than plants, interestingly, when you look at them genetically. And there are hundreds of different edible varieties that will give your gut microbiome a rich variety. So I think their suits also become, when you ferment them, they become really good meat alternatives of the future. And I think we're going to be seeing a lot more about mushrooms. And interestingly, of all the plants I saw that had amazing claims for them, I think it was mushrooms that came out top in terms of helping chemotherapy in cancer and in lowering blood pressure, etc. Really convincing studies. So I think my message is that don't get fooled by the advertising and go for the most expensive, exotic, tropical seed or berry or plant. Many of them, under our noses, and we need to use it and just, have a look and see if there's any data on the fiber. If you can get something on the polyphenol counts, but you can't go far wrong if berries, nuts and seeds and mushrooms would be the top of my list. But, there are plenty of others. And of course, what I want people to do is to go out there and be adventurous and find different ones every week. Don't get stuck on the same berry. That's a route to isolation.
How do you feel about the medicinal mushrooms, things like chaga, reishi? And these aren't mushrooms that we cook up and consume, but we would use them through tinctures or making teas. Are you a fan?
I wasn't convinced that there's hard evidence to support them. I mean, unless you're into the psychedelic mushrooms, where there's definitely an effect that the psilocybin producing mushrooms definitely have effects, and there are now proper trials showing that they can actually cure depression, anxiety, and potentially schizophrenia, but you shouldn't take them without, supervision and in a very controlled environment. But for the other ones, it was all anecdote, really. I couldn't find hard evidence to support them. But, I'm a big fan of all mushrooms anyway. So, but what was interesting is you often get more nutrients out of them when you have them slightly cooked than you do having them raw. So there obviously will be exceptions to certain chemicals that come out. So just steeping them in tea might give you very different chemicals than if you just fry them in oil or steam them. But I think we're in the real learning stages here, and we should all eat much more mushrooms. So however you consume them, I think it's a good thing. But yeah, I'm paying ridiculous prices for some of them. I think that's more marketing, and just because a mushroom is given a fancy name, rather than its Latin name, I'm not sure I'd pay an extra $20 for.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
I think we've gone far too far the wrong way, and we need to get back to much more natural methods, certainly. That's my go-to oil, and I think it's going to be the best for you.